Press that button. Yeah. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome, everybody. First of all, before we get to the fire alerts, for some of you, I think you haven't been here before. You're very, very welcome. I would ask you, if you need to use the toilets or have a comfort break, if you go outside the door and turn left, you'll find the toilets, or if you go out of that door, they're ahead of you. But just go and use them as you wish. Will you please turn your phones off if you've got them on? And we will have, if the meeting goes on for more than 2 hours, we will have a comfort break then. But I don't know what the timing is at all. And we've now got Cameron Overton who will read out the fire safety statement.
Thank you, Chair. We are not expecting a fire alarm, so if one does go off, please make your way out of the nearest exit. That'll be either through those doors over there and then down the stairs which you came up, or out of the chamber fire door, which is just over there. Please do not use the lifts. The fire assembly point is at the front of the car park by the exit barrier. Thank you.
Just for your information, we have a meeting reference to applications from SOAM, and that is being held on Tuesday the 13th, unusually next week. And because there's a considerable interest in that meeting, we have decided to double the speaking time of any of the groups of people who wish to speak. But that may be not relevant to you at the moment. I think that's all I've got to say under my announcements. But I'm now going to ask Cameron, have you got any apologies and substitutions?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we do. We have apologies from Councillor Ambrose Smith, who is substituted by Councillor Keith Horgan, and apologies from Councillor Trapp, who is substituted by Mary Wade, who I believe is on her way now.
Okay, do we have any declarations of interest? No. And the minutes from the previous meeting, are they correct and can I sign them? I believe we have an alteration actually.
Thank you, Chair. It's agenda item, I say, it's page 7, referring to on the minutes, the third paragraph down, where it says the applicant Richard Morby addressed the committee. Mr. Morby's name is Alistair rather than Richard, so if we could correct that, please.
Are you okay with that? It's quite clear that that the Vice Chair has pointed out a legitimate mistake, but I will sign them over. Members of the public, just so you know, the people sitting down here are members. I'm a member. My co-chairman is a member. The other people you see are officers. They will advise us legally or technically as appropriate, but it is only the members who make the decisions as whether something is permitted or not, so you know. Right, we'll now move on to item number 5, and it's the officer's presentation.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. So item 5 is for a single-storey extension and detached cart lodge with associated works at 48 Mill Lane, Stetchworth. You can see on the map just behind me that the site is outlined in black. So the site is located on the western boundary of Stetchworth, just outside the policy-defined development envelope. So the development envelope is outlined on this map in yellow. As a result of this, the character of the wider area feels rural. This is reflected within the open country views, irregular housing forms, agricultural buildings, and surrounding vegetation. The site is accessed from an unclassified road with limited vehicle usage. As illustrated on the map in blue, a public right-of-way runs adjacent to the southeastern, western and southeastern boundary. The site is located within a conservation area and is located opposite to the Old Mill, which is a non-designated heritage asset as identified within the council's adopted local list. As previously mentioned, the application seeks permission for a single-storey extension forward to the principal elevation of the host dwelling and for the erection of a detached cart lodge. So the existing dwelling currently has a footprint of approximately 164.84 square meters. This is 1,774.3 square feet. And the proposed extension would add approximately an additional 61 square meters to the dwelling. This is roughly a 38% increase. So you can see behind me there are some site photos that have been included just to illustrate how open and spacious the site is and to give an idea of the surrounding context. The main considerations for this application are the principle of development, the design and its effect upon the visual amenity and the character of the area, the effects upon the residential amenity of the nearby occupiers, highway safety, any harm to the non-designated heritage asset, and the ecology of the site and the sustainability of the proposal. Principle of development. The site is located outside of the development envelope. Officers felt that the principle of development has already been established as the proposal is of a minor nature and within an established residential curtilage. However, officers consider the proposal is not compliant with Growth 2, as it does not satisfy other policies of the local plan, including HOW 8, and if approved, would create an adverse impact onto the character of the countryside. With regards to design and character, officers consider there to be fundamental concerns with the design of the proposal, with the application introducing unnecessary, unjustified harm and inappropriate forms of development to the site. The most critical flaw of the design is the location of the extension. Being forward to the principal elevation, the host dwelling is concealed by the excessive additional mass. Officers would not consider this extension to be a subservient addition to the site. Furthermore, there is no significant reason to grant permission for an extension within this location, as the open and spacious site provides many opportunities for more appropriate extensions within better suited locations. The proposed use of materials to match the existing is noted by officers, but not considered sufficient enough to mitigate any overpowering impact onto the site. I also believe the architectural ornamentation reads different to the host dwelling as it is of a contrasting aesthetic. With regards to the cart lodge, again, officers believe the location of the cart lodge to be unwarranted, inappropriate, and contradictory to the aims of the design guide. The scale is considered to be excessive and provides visual clutter to the country views. Notwithstanding my previous design concerns, I have concluded that the proposal will offer neutral impacts to the significance of the Old Mill. This is due to its disconnected relationship by virtue of the substantial distance between the two structures. Concern has been raised by neighbouring occupiers, with regards to the proposed cart lodge, preventing natural lighting and outlook from their kitchen dining area at 46 Mill Lane. However, with a fence of a substantial height already doing this and additional fenestration on other elevations to mitigate the impacts, officers consider the proposed cart lodge would not significantly alter or worsen the existing situation. With regards to the proposed extension, by virtue of the structure's single-storey nature and proximity to neighbouring dwellings, this aspect of the proposal is not considered to cause any detrimental effects onto the residential amenity of the nearby occupiers. In terms of highways considerations, the application proposes a new access, parking and turning area, and cart lodge. From reviewing the planning history, it was discovered that the proposed access has already been found acceptable and approved under a previous application in 2018, which can be seen on the slide. However, with regards to the proposed materials, insufficient information was provided. Therefore, it was not possible for officers to make a full assessment of the proposal. However, it is noted that the highways officers have raised no objections to the proposal. Concern has been raised with regards to ecology by the council's ecologist, that the existing cladding on the host dwelling required to be removed to facilitate the erection of the single-storey extension may be a habitat for bats. Therefore, further investigations would be required prior to determination. However, this was not sought by officers due to the following recommendation. Additionally, no sustainability measures have been put forward as part of this application. While this does weigh against it, this does not form a reason for refusal on its own merit. So members are recommended to refuse the application on the basis of the design not being of a high enough quality to be considered beautiful, and the proposal's detrimental effects to the visual amenity of the site and character of the wider area. This is contrary to policies EMV1, EMV2, HAL 8 and Grove 2 of the local plan. Additionally, the lack of supporting information and evidence with regards to the existing ecology of the site is also a recommended reason for refusal, as this has restricted a full assessment of the impacts to the existing ecology of the site. This is contrary to EMV7 of the local plan. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed. It was a very comprehensive report and it gives us a lot of information. We've now got a statement from Chrissy Stokes, who is being read by Cameron.
Thank you, Chair. So it reads, we wish to object to the siting of the cart lodge. From studying the plans, it appears the cart lodge will be sited directly in front of two windows in our kitchen/dining/living space and at a distance of some 2 to 3 meters. This room is 33 feet long and includes the kitchen, a separate table for eating, plus a settee and TV. We are both retired and the room is in constant use each day. The two windows in question are on our side wall and play a big part in the amount of light entering the room. With each window being 5 foot by 3 foot 6 inches, they face the boundary of the fence with a footpath. The distance of the windows from the boundary fence is 3 foot 4 inches, and the width of the footpath, fence to fence, is a further 3 foot 4 inches. Currently, our fence obscures half of each window, but still gives a view of the trees and sky, whereas the rear of the proposed cart lodge, because of its size, height, and close proximity to our windows, will completely block any light or view. As mentioned, our kitchen, dining, living space is a much-used habitable space, and we believe that under the East Cambridgeshire Local Plan 2015, as amended in the 2023 EMV2, we are justified in objecting. The siting of the cart lodge would have a significant detrimental effect on the room and ourselves due to loss of light and view. We would also like to mention that under previous planning application 18/0074/FUL and 21/0693/VAR, the parking spaces relating to 48 Mill Lane, 2 cars and a horse box, were positioned nearer the road and would not have obstructed our light or view. If the cart lodge were to be built in line with that application, we would have no objection. We have previously sent you a copy of the proposed plan noting the position of our windows, a copy of the prior application along with relevant photos. The case officer also visited our property and took some photos. We trust you will give our comments, photographs and amended plans showing the position of our windows due consideration before reaching any decision. Christine Stokes and Norman Gerald. Thank you.
Well, since Chrissy isn't here, we can't ask members to ask her questions. So we move on to the applicants, Kim Bartlett. Did I hear something? Oh, right. Okay. Would you like to come up and speak? You've got 5 minutes, and please make sure you turn the microphone on.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you for you today, allowing us to evidence the work we've undertaken on this proposal. We initially engaged with the planning team through pre-application to get as much advice and consideration that we could in order to make a formal application. The pre-app letter provides little specifics in terms of scale or footprint reductions, leaving for our interpretation of their comments. Therefore, we proceeded with a revised scheme which made the following changes: reduce the footprint by 10 square metres, reduce the ridge height to the lowest possible for the extension, reduce the scale and decorative features of glazing on the extension, reduced height of the garage. The existing front elevation has no ground floor window to serve the family room. Therefore, the main body of the extension projecting from this section of the property would do little to detract from important original features of the property. The design has ensured the main ridge of the extension follows the orientation and character of the original dwelling and keeps the eaves the same height with the porch. We have ensured the front elevation has interest with fenestration, but this does not overly compete with the original property. We accept the extension is partially to the front of the property and therefore notable in the street scene, but this is a stop end of a small lane which already has further developments, and all the timber and the brickwork, etc., not only reflects the 3 properties currently being built within that area, my stable block, and interestingly enough, the old mill opposite. It's a nice, that's an old red brick, black and red brick. Mine is Ibstock red, but it very much reflects, which is what we'd always wanted to do, that the whole stop end had a nice uniformity in the countryside. Anyhow, we, let's see now, it's okay. It is a single-storey extension which takes its design from the original building and ensures it leaves the majority of the original building uninterrupted from the street scene. In particular, when you approach along Mill Lane, the extension will be secondary to the view of the original house. The pre-app letter raised no objections to the principle of partially extending to the front. However, the committee report since advises, I quote, "It is considered there is no significant reason to warrant an extension forward to the principal elevation, contrary to policy. Through extending from the front elevation, the original building form is disrupted, creating a visually jarring, asymmetrical building form, diminishing and concealing the host dwelling." This firm stance and objection to a partial front extension was not illustrated at the pre-app submission, leading us to proceed with the design proposed. No request was made at pre-app stage to provide a significant reasoning for seeking to extend to the front of our property, and we cannot identify which policy this is a requirement from. This is unreasonable, in my opinion, given the dwelling is not a heritage asset and the impact to the locally listed building has been considered neutral by the officer. Regardless, we would advise the committee the extension is best placed to suit our needs and its purpose on the existing farm. Whilst the officer may suggest for this to be to the side, the floor area and design sort would still be required. Ultimately, the extension proposed is what we deem necessary for how I live and how I work on the farm, and including my staff. And the way we use the property with the layout presented, it would be much better for the business and for my daily life. The garage has also been included in the reason for refusal, and the officer report states, I quote, "By virtue of the structure's excessive scale, inappropriate location and inadequate design, the cart lodge is made to be a prominent feature of the site." Whereas the pre-app letter advised the design is considered to be reserved and appropriate for the Royal site. However, the scale of the garage is excessive with a ridge height of over 6 metres. This should be scaled down to help the outbuilding remain more discreet within the site, more proportionate to its function. Therefore, the location of the garage was not deemed a concern, and the main issue was the ridge height. We therefore reduced the height of the garage from approximately 6 metres to 4.2. and considered we had overcome the officer's concerns. Therefore, to be presented with further issues and essentially fundamental principles after paying for pre-app advice is frustrating, to say the least. In regards to the second reason for refusal, the opportunity for this investigation of the cladding was not supplied, given the officer's decision to recommend for refusal without amendment. Therefore, we feel this reason for refusal based on insufficient information is unfair, as the opportunity for us to address this was not provided. Regardless, we would be happy to support a pre-commencement condition for investigation of the cladding prior to any form of works on site linked to the extension. And it's noted that there are separate legislative protections from the planning system under the Wildlife Act. A further condition would secure the additional nest boxes the ecologists would like to see within the design. We recognise the importance of protecting ecology and habitats, and I would not wish to see any harm from the extension or outbuilding, or indeed my existing home. Therefore, we would ask the committee to...
You are over your 5 minutes.
Am I? Sorry. Okay. Right.
If you've got a sentence you want to finish, or
I'm sorry. Very briefly, if I may.
a sentence.
Okay. We go. I think we can leave it at that, really. I think I've made my point.
Okay, well, if you'll just stay where you are,
Yes. Well,
members will be able to ask you questions. Members, questions to the applicant. Councillor Lay.
Yes, having visited the site this morning, I wondered why the cart lodge wasn't designed to go alongside the road entrance rather than up against the property next door.
well, the reason for that is we considered that the access in and out of Mill Lane, which is quite a small lane, and we are a stop end there, was A, safer, and B, we considered that it was more than far enough away with a 6-foot high fence going halfway up the neighbours' windows, which has been there since they moved in. It's their own fence, including the one that then is the other side of the footpath on my property. And as far as I can see, I can't see any loss of light to them, and they can't certainly see any trees from that window because there aren't any. Or if you were doing anything, you'd be looking straight over into the 3 new build houses opposite. It's all right.
Members, any other questions? Keith.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to put everything into perspective. Obviously, there's quite a bit of land there
Yes.
surrounding the house. There's a field behind,
Yes.
and obviously there's a large sort of stony area in front. I presume both the land at the front, the stony area, where you're going to hopefully put an extension and a cart lodge, and the field behind, is that all in your ownership?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Because obviously what confused me originally when I visited the site was that you've got a small boundary fence, a small wooden fence, yay high, 4 foot high, surrounding what would presumably be considered a garden area, for want of a better expression. And if that was your only ownership of land, to have built on that footprint could have consumed virtually all of the garden area at that point. But I think, I'm certainly speaking for myself and maybe 1 or 2 other councillors, to actually build out in the direction that you have confused me as to why you would want to build out forwards as opposed to using space at the side or encroach perhaps slightly into the field area behind. And I think that's something that certain people, shall we say, are finding difficult to sort of come to terms with. Can you just help me understand your rationale why you would want to build in that direction as opposed to go out as you face the building, maybe to its left or slightly back to the field behind?
Well, I don't want to build on any more grassland. I need it for my livestock because I breed horses and I've got a flock of sheep. And secondly, there's a lovely big window to the left of the property, looking out across the garden and also into the field, so I can see what's going on. And to the other side, that's where the Clargester is, obviously. So but to come out that way, but not to come out to a significant distance, but then have access from my stable block, which is on the other side, which you probably saw, It means that with a shower room and a boot room and so on, which I don't have, I've got a tiny little cubby hole at the back of the house that I can just cram a
If-
washing machine. and
If I may
dishwasher.
say, this section is for just straight questions from members and
Oh,
straight
sorry.
answers.
Well, okay, well, the answer also is, because it's piecemeal, it means myself, my staff or anybody can get in quickly from the stable yard or from the fields and freshen up, use a toilet. And when I've been lambing and foaling, I certainly don't want to have to walk right through the house. You can imagine. It's okay.
Right, members, any more direct questions for the applicant? No? No. Okay, thank
Thanks
you
very
very
much.
much
Thank
indeed.
you.
We've now got Councillor Sharp. If you'll notice, the microphone's still on, Councillor. Can you just hold on a second
Yeah,
while
sure.
we have a question? So if you'll go ahead now.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think I'll be pushing the 5 minutes, but we'll see. I called this in and I speak before it today because I felt it warranted consideration by planning committee. I think it's a subjective decision in terms of how much the extension, I'm trying to think of the right words, distorts the main house or changes, you know, makes an effect on it. And therefore, it's a question whether the applicant has changed the design enough to satisfy the planning officer. Obviously, at the moment, they haven't. It's proposed to be an extension to be used by. So I'll stop for a minute and let. Yeah, I've finished. Yeah.
Okay, we won't be too strict with you, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think I'll be the 5 minutes. As I said, I just felt it warranted consideration by planning committee. As I was just about to say, as the applicant has said, the extension is to be used by staff as well for coming in off the fields and using that. So it's not a totally residential application. As has been said, the principle of development is established already. I'm slightly confused by the comments about harm to the countryside, knowing that area quite well. And certainly in the report, it says that materials have been sympathetically selected to match the existing agricultural nature side. I personally also had concerns about the proximity to the cart lodge. I've certainly spoken to those two people. By chance, I did meet them a few weeks ago. But certainly the officer in their report is saying because of the fence, the 6-foot fence that is there, that is not necessarily an issue. So I would accept that. We're then saying that there's reasons for sufficient evidence with regard to the existing ecology, and that the lack of ecology wouldn't play a part in the decision, yet we've got it listed as a reason for refusal. So I'm slightly confused there. I do feel, and this is probably one of the major reasons I brought it in, I do feel the new system hasn't helped this application, because there was a pre-app. The applicant has then gone away and made some changes, obviously not enough to satisfy the officer, and I understand where Jasmine is coming from. But I think if we'd been under the old system, I think, and I understand totally we needed to stop the continual amendments that have been going on. But I think with some sensible discussion, we may have got to a satisfactory situation, but obviously we haven't been able to on this. That's all I really wanted to say, Chair. Thank you.
Have members got questions for Councillor Sharp, who is the ward member? Yes, Councillor Lay.
Councillor Sharp, has this been discussed by your parish councils regarding this application?
Yes, it has, James. The parish council had no. I'm a member of the Stetsworth Parish Council, so I spoke and I was present at that meeting, but the parish council had no objections.
Okay. Any other questions for Councillor Sharp? Okay, thank you, Councillor Sharp. Now, any more comments from the planning manager?
I've got a few, if I may, sorry.
Of
Just
course.
a couple of points of clarification. First of all, indeed, a couple of things. First of all, the dwelling itself is a residential dwelling. That was clarified in the certificate of lawfulness back in 2010, where the description is residential dwelling within a defined curtilage. And members will need to note that the planning application was made on a household application form. There is no business use. This is not an application for residential and business use. It is purely for a residential extension, and no other justification has been given. And it would have needed to have been done under a full for that to have been the case. So that's just a technical point.
Could I just also add to that view is also not a material consideration, whereas concerns like loss of light or overbearing would be. I would also like to add that the ecology would be needed to be submitted prior to the determination of the application, and we wouldn't be looking to secure this by a condition, just because we need to completely eliminate any potential impacts that the proposal could cause to the bats. And we would need to know this before determination, but that's it. Thank you.
Okay, now we've got to the stage where members can ask either of the two planning officers questions. So members, away you go.
Thank you, Chair. While we were on site, we saw that there's been some new building already there, new houses and that. Are they within the development envelope or outside of it?
They're outside of it. They're on what would be considered to have been previously developed land.
Right, there you go. And is there a reason why the applicant didn't get a full disclosure of what was acceptable? I just come back and said that she wasn't told of different aspects of why you're refusing it now in a pre-app stage. So, you know, could some of this have all been ironed out at that stage?
So I can confirm what we can't do is we won't go through the pre-application response because that's private. It's between the council and the applicant. Only they're able to disclose that. But the response was circa 4 pages long, and does give reasonably detailed guidance as to what the council considers to be acceptable and not acceptable. One of the points which was raised by the applicant was around the cot lodge and the location of that, and at no point in the response do we actually comment that it's acceptable in that location. The conversation at that point, because the scheme as a whole was unacceptable, was around the fact that it was too large and the design wasn't acceptable. What we're not there to do is to design the schemes for applicants. What we will do is we will give them guidance as to what is acceptable, what's not, what do our policies say, what do our design guidances say, and direct them to the areas of their scheme that they need to work on. What we can't do is to design it for them. That's not what a pre-application service is for. Thank you.
And my
Have
third
a
question
second, yeah.
is, are there any evidence of bats being there, or is it just in case there were?
We have a statutory requirement because it's a protected species to prove that or to have confidence that there isn't. Without the report, we are unable to do that. So therefore, we would not be meeting our statutory obligation. That is why prior to determination, we need to have that information. It's a legal requirement. It's not the council being difficult. It's we need to satisfy ourselves that we are protecting that species under that regulations. Thank you.
I understand that, and thank you very much for that answer, but surely that should have been done before it comes to planning, surely.
If we know of it, then it would be a requirement under our validation. However, in this instance, because it's down to the materials and the type of cladding that's on this property, it was identified by our council's ecologist upon review that that is a potential risk, and therefore, because it was raised at that stage, that's why we've asked for it at that stage. Thank you.
Any other councillor? Akinwale, sorry, councillor Akinwale.
Thank you, Chair. Is it not possible to add these particular evidence as a condition to the application form? Thank you.
As I've just said, the problem we have is the legislation is clear that we have to have this information prior to determination of a planning permission. So we have to be 100% convinced that we're able to grant a consent where there will be no detrimental effect on a protected species. So that's why we need to have that report ahead. We can't just condition it and require a report afterwards. That's not an approach that councils are allowed to take, I'm afraid. So if members were minded to want to approve the application, we would need to effectively defer until we had that information, just for a point of clarity. Thank you.
Councillor Wade.
I think I was just about to say, so essentially the two outcomes today can be to refuse it or to defer it pending about.
Correct, yes.
Councillor Wade, have you been answered by the officers?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Lay.
I noticed that we are saying on the application that the original house was 164 square meters, and that the applicant wanted to put another 60 square meters onto the house to enlarge the house to 2,204 square meters or thereabouts. What I'm really asking you is that unusual for you to allow that amount of extension to go on a particular property, or is that outside the size requirement you would expect on a property?
So we don't have any fixed numbers or particular specification on what we would consider to be a subservient addition. But as I have stated in my report and on the presentation, I don't disagree with the principle of an extension. I just feel that given the size of it and given the location of the extension, this wouldn't be appropriate forward to the principal elevation.
Yes.
So are you saying that you haven't approved applications where 37% of development has taken place on a particular property?
We're not saying either way, councillor. What we're saying is there's no hard and fast rules. We need to take into account the site considerations, the design, the context and the package as a whole. On a large site, you may find a large extension is appropriate depending on its impacts in other ways. In this instance, taking into account the council's design guide, taking into account the council's policies and the character and appearance of the locale, the officer has considered that by virtue of the extension being both large and forward of the principal elevation, that it is inappropriate development. What we're not saying is it's because it's a certain percentage above the original. We're saying as taking the whole into account.
Councillor Horgan.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to check my understanding on two matters, if I may. BATS and the pre-application advice. Dealing with BATS first. I hear what you say, that it is a statutory requirement that before the matter can be decided, it needs to be done. But presumably the pre-application advice does not include any involvement of the ecology officer that might determine the need or otherwise for a BAT study to be done. Is that correct?
Sorry, just bear with me 2 seconds, Councillor. I'm very quickly skimming through the response because obviously I didn't write it. 1 sec. In this instance, no, it doesn't include any comments from the ecology officer. This is an unusual one, if I'm honest with you. It's not often when we get an ecology comment based on the materials of a host dwelling. So because this was, when it came in for pardon the expression, a fairly standard pre-application advice for a householder extension, we didn't envisage that there was likely to be a potential ecology impact on it. Moving forward to something that Councillor Sharp raised, I think it's probably pertinent at this point. If we had been happy with everything else and that was the only thing that was outstanding, we would have agreed an extension of time to allow them to undertake the survey. But because the officer was already of the view that the extension itself was unacceptable, it wasn't considered beneficial to any party to elongate the process. The point of clarity. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think you've clarified my understanding that at the pre-app stage, ecology officer not involved, therefore the subject of BATS obviously wasn't covered at that stage, and it's only come to light subsequently after the pre-application advice. That's my understanding. A yes or no answer would be
Spot on. Correct.
Thank you. Now, in terms of the pre-application advice, and pardon my paraphrasing of your comments, there appears to be some minor disagreement as to whether or not the pre-application advice has met the applicant's expectations or not. And again, there's no reflection on anybody's activities. The only question I've got is are all the grounds on which you now wish to recommend refusal, were all of them mentioned in the pre-application advice, or have some of them only come to light post that at the point of full application?
With regard to the single story front extension, yes, absolutely. There's significant detail goes in to talk about the need to reduce the size, reduce the complexity of the design and concerns around its location. With regards to the outbuilding, there are comments around the scale, the height, and the design. As I alluded to earlier, sorry, there was no specific comment about location, but that was because at that point, which in hindsight possibly we could have added a line on that, but the rest of it was considered to be unacceptable and needed for quite significant further works on it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. So again, just to check my clarification, happy for a yes or no answer. The points on which you wish to recommend refusal, they were all included and mentioned in the pre-application advice, but perhaps not to the extent at which a reduction in the footprint of the extension. You know, you've said reduce the footprint, but as you say, quite rightly, you're not there to give them free planning advice in terms of design it this way to this size or what have you. But you've said it needs to be smaller, but not specifically how much smaller. Is that fair?
Yes,
observation?
And that's a fairly standard approach on pre-app. So we wouldn't say to you, it must be X meters deep unless there was an absolute cast iron reason, for example, building line or something like that, when we would say that, because as I said, it's for them to go away and work out in line with their needs, because clearly, obviously, they have certain needs as to what they want from their extension for them to be able to work out their best way forward.
Thank you, Chair. That answers my questions.
You're finished. Right, any more questions to the officers? If not, I'm going to move on to debate. We are on debate. Members.
And I think Councillor Sharp has brought an interesting matter forward in terms of a new process that is bedding in terms of this pre-application advice prior to a full application being made, and that the changes that have been made, we're still learning as to what works and what doesn't work. And clearly here, somebody says, oh, I want to build this, and then the pre-application advice is, well, no, that's a bit too big, but we're not going to tell you how small you have to go before it is acceptable. That's not the purpose of the pre-application advice, and I completely understand that. But it does lend itself to that sort of confusion, for want of a better word, that I know I've got to make it smaller, but I don't know how small I've got to go before I get the approval or the nod. And I think one of the problems is that I guess we'll probably learn as the new system beds in further as to what works and what doesn't work, and we can then maybe just adjust our pre-application advice to accommodate that sort of, I won't say weakness in the system, but as I always say, a vagary in the system, to make sure that what we don't get is a situation where it says, well, I've made it smaller, but you're now just saying it's still not small enough, or it's in the wrong orientation, or what, you know?
I think you made the point there, and it's a valid one at that. David, you want to say something?
Yeah, it's just respectfully, Councillor Organ, the pre-application advice service is not something new. This isn't what we've just introduced. What we introduced is a negotiation protocol, which is how we deal with negotiations through planning applications. The pre-application service is, whilst we've changed the charging schedule on it, is as it has been for the last number of years. Thank you. Just as a clarification point for members.
Members, on the debate still, Councillor Lay.
Well, like Alan Sharp, I'm the district councillor for that particular ward. And, you know, when we have applications come in front of us and we look at the scale of the application, the size of the plot that it's on, and the street scenes, we often look at them and say, well, they've tried to cram too much in to a tiny area. They've tried to put something in that doesn't match the street scene. But, you know, in this case, putting another 60 square meters on the side of that property, one, it's not going to be seen from anywhere, except probably those two new houses which they've built on the particular site. And, you know, for the last 30 or 40 years, that has been a livery yard up there. And there have been animals up there, horses, and increasing the size of that property in comparison to the size of land that it actually sits on doesn't seem to me to be overdeveloped. And as the local district councillor, I'm afraid I will go against the officers and propose that we accept this eventually. Thank you.
More members on debate. There's a hand. I wasn't quite sure whose it was. Councillor Akinwale, it's yours.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'm more inclined towards deferring the application form to a further date, if possible. Thank you.
Just 1 second. Okay. Thank you. I understand what you've said. Did I see any other hands? Councillor Horgan.
I concur with councillor Akinwari, and I tend to be leaning more towards deferment such that matters can be addressed that need to be done on a statutory basis prior to actually considering for approval.
I'd just like to make a few comments I made now in debate. I'm very conscious of the fact that this is outside the envelope, which is something to be considered. And in my experience in planning with this authority, it's always been my understanding that extensions should be subservient and not dominant. And certainly by the positioning and the size of this extension, I believe that doesn't comply with that regulation of being subservient. And I would also draw attention to the comment called pre-app. I mean, it is advice. It's not a decision. It's advice that's given and which is sought, and therefore I'm aware that when it is given, it is always given in without condition or without commitment. And I think we should remember that. Personally, I think it is overdevelopment. I think it is it's squeezing too much out of that site. However, I listened to the comments that various members have made. Personally, the application has been pointed out by the senior manager that the application is a domestic one, and that the use of this extension is by the applicant's comment is for people who are working and employed there to come and use as a sort of collecting room and a restroom. So it's got other uses other than just a domestic, or it would have other uses. So I'm afraid I'm for the reasons that the applicants, the officers have said that they recommend refusal. That's exactly what I'm going to do. And I'm going to propose that we go with the officer's recommendation. Now, eventually we may have to go to 2 votes, but that's and I don't know if there's anybody who is going to second me on that. Sorry, I will leave it that I'm proposing that we go along with the officers, and I understand Councillor Wade wants to speak.
Yeah, so just on that same point, I don't think approve is an option. So with I think Councillor Lay, you suggested we would approve it. My understanding is approve is an option. It's either defer or it's refuse. Is that correct?
If I may, what I was going to suggest, and obviously it's for members to decide how they word their proposals, but to save the need for it to come back to planning committee, which, bearing in mind the only outstanding matter would be ecology, is I would suggest that any proposal is something along the lines of delegating it to myself with the resolution to approve, subject to the successful resolution of the ecology related matters. That way then is, if members are happy today to overturn the officer's recommendation around design and location, that would leave ecology to be the only thing, and that's, as we say, that's a statutory issue rather than anything else. And obviously, if members are satisfied with everything else, I don't see the need to waste anybody else's time and money to bring it back here again for further determination. So I would urge yourselves to obviously consider those first elements, and then should you be minded to take that route, to then delegate authority to myself to then deal with that under delegated powers in respect to the ecology issues. Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Thanks, Chairman. Couple of things. Firstly, if we're going to go that route, people have got to be 100% clear that they're happy with that extension coming out of the front. And I have to say that I accept beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but I don't like the look of it. So I will be seconding your proposal to go with the officer's recommendation. But if you people do want to go down the route of delegating approval, please be sure that you're happy with the siting of both the cart lodge and the extension coming out the front of the building.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to go with the approval with the dedication towards yourself. Thank you.
So you want to approve the application with the condition that what? And what was that?
So that was delegating authority to myself to issue the planning permission upon upon resolution of the
So it
ecology related
is, so it is
issues.
that you want to go against the officer's recommendation, approve the application with the conditions as defined by the planning manager. Is that? Councillor Lay.
I'd like to second that proposal.
Okay. Councillor Goodall.
Thank you, Chair. This is going to be very difficult for me because there's already been development inside that envelope or outside the development envelope with them new 3 houses. To say you're not going to grant it on the grounds it's without outside the development envelope and you've granted it to someone else is setting a precedent.
I said as proposed by the officer, and one of the reasons wasn't outside the development envelope.
Yes, I'm debating them. I'm not, and this is why I'm having difficulty because, like Councillor Brown said, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Just because I don't like something doesn't mean it shouldn't be allowed. You know, if it's against everything along that street and it sticks out like a sore thumb, I understand that. But the development's got the same cladding, it's got the same bricks, and it's just, you don't like the design. But not everyone will like the design of something. So at the moment, I'm still undecided how I'm going to vote. I'm listening to arguments, but this is a difficult situation and I'm just want to see what happens.
If I may comment, what happens is in some respect in your hands. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chairman. I believe I'm correct in saying that if we were to refuse, as the officer suggested, the applicant could come back with an amended version, which the officers would then look at and might well just approve. That's correct, isn't it?
That is correct, and we would encourage
And it wouldn't actually incur any additional costs because it's a second application, isn't it?
that's incorrect, unfortunately. The free-go was wiped out in December last year. So I'm afraid there would be a further application fee.
But then it certainly would be possible to amend it according to the officer's requirements. If we were to refuse it, as the officers recommend, saying that we can see that there are some difficulties with it. I mean, quite frankly, it's a building which you can't really see from anywhere except from within the curtilage of the actual building itself. It's absolutely off the area, isn't it, with a fence all around it and at the end of an alleyway. It doesn't really affect neighbours in particular. The cart lodge marginally affects the neighbour next door, but not very much. So, but I think that so it wouldn't need very much modification to make it acceptable, I would have thought.
Well, I think we just have almost everybody has spoken. There's clearly not a unanimous decision in the room. The proposal that I made was the first of the formal proposals. So we're going to vote on that one first. And the proposal was by myself and seconded by Councillor Brown, which was to accept the officer's recommendations and refuse the application for the reasons that are in the agenda. Will those of those who support that proposal please raise their hands? Okay. Will those who are against that recommendation please raise their hands? Will those who are abstaining please raise their hands? You've got everybody. So what is the result?
5, 4, 3 against, 2 abstain.
5, 4, 3 against. And how many abstain? 2. Well, then there's 6 in favour. Oh, it's a critical. Right, so the application has been refused for the reasons as stated in the agenda. If anybody wants to leave, they're welcome to leave now, or they're welcome to stay. We'll just wait a minute or two till. Okay, that was hello. That was a very informal break. We would have, I'm not counting as one, it was just to let people leave the room. So now we go on to agenda item 6, and we've got the officer's presentation.
Thank you, Chair and members. So I'm presenting item 6, 23/0230/HYBM, and that's for Whitehall Warehouse on Lynn Road, Littleport, Cambridgeshire. I'm presenting this in accordance with the council's constitution, as it's above what is a delegated item. So I'm just going to point out here the location. Obviously, we were on site earlier today. So here's the roundabout at Littleport, the river running along here, and then here is the site. Slightly more colourful map, so you can just see, again, here is the site, here is the river, and the roundabout. I think this one gives a very good overview of the site in terms of the area of land. So the site is, as I shown you, and we stood just about here this morning. As you can see, that is the boundary treatment and the planting you could see in the distance along here. There is the existing business operation, and there are 2 residential properties here, and one has a garage with a flat or some kind of residential use above. So what is the permission? What is the application for? So it's a strange one. It's actually a hybrid application, we call it. So we have, the application is in part for a full application, and this is for the erection of 2 warehouses in this location related to the business operating here, with car parking and sort of lorry entrance to enable deliveries, with the access road showing here, and it would come off the lay-by here that we stood in earlier today. The use at the moment of this building here is for the storage of art, antiquities, and artwork from museums, personal collections. And the outline planning permission is for these pieces of land here, here, and here. And that is for commercial floor space. And although we have access agreed as part of the outline, appearance, landscaping, layout and scale would form part of a reserved matters application. So in terms of the buildings proposed on site, so we have Unit A, and this would be 50 metres, 164 feet by 37 metres, 121 feet, with a height of 10 metres or 32 feet. And for this, for Block A, it would include a mezzanine floor for an office, 19 car parking spaces and cycle provision within the site. And these are the other elevations for building A. And then we have building B. And again, this is the same. It's 37 metres, 121 feet, 50 metres or 164 feet, 10 metres in height or 32 feet in height. So what are the main considerations? So it's the principle of development, design, character and density, residential amenity, highways, access and movement, biodiversity and trees, flood risk and drainage. So in terms of the principle of development, we're looking at Growth 2, EMP2 and EMP3. So in terms of the character of the area, it's rural, outside the development envelope, but it is between built form on its immediate boundaries. Is the scale in keeping with its surroundings? The current building, so if we go back, so this current building here that we saw today is currently 40 metres by 50 metres. So what's being proposed is comparable to what is already existing on site. Highways and traffic. It's access from the A10 and has good road connections because obviously the A10 is a major route from London up into Kings Lynn. And the local authority has not, local highways authority have not raised any objections. Is it a current operational business? Yes, we know that the operational business is adjacent to the site and they are looking to extend their existing business. We will discuss residential amenities, but I will discuss that further in the presentation. In terms of justification, it's a successful business. It's ready to expand and take on more of what it already does successfully. Is there a lack of suitable sites? Well, there's none of the Littleport sites currently provide a B8 use, which is the use that they are currently operating under. There's a lack of suitable buildings. Essentially, there aren't any buildings on that piece of land. That is where they currently operate and obviously where they would want to stay. They own the land, so the lack of suitable buildings may not apply. Access. Okay, there's no cycleway or footpath. However, it does have good access by road. In terms of the design and character, obviously, we were at the unit earlier today and we stood just here and looked in. You can see that there was the metal fence along here and that there was a significant drop from the road down into the site. Then you can see the site here where the proposal would sit. That's not where the height would be, it's just so that you can demonstrate where the site would be. And then these are the residential properties here. And we could see this outbuilding garage when we were on site. So in terms of the design, obviously the design is very much in keeping with the existing character of the Unit 1 store, has an agricultural appearance, some signage and lighting may be required. However, the advert consent would be required under separate legislation, so would need its own application, and lighting we can also condition. In terms of residential amenity, When we were on site, you could see the pair of semi-detached dwellings here, and then there's the large garage in here. As you can see, there is a buffer zone proposed around the site. And it's considered that this would address any concerns with regard to noise, light. In terms of loss of view, as we know, that is not a material consideration. We also know that there was no objections from Littleport Parish Council, although we did receive one letter of objection with regard to light pollution, noise, which we can control through condition. In terms of traffic, however, the Local Highways Authority raised no objection. But there is a concern about the loss of trees. However, we can request landscaping, and that is one of the conditions suggested. And the loss of views, as I've stated, is not a material consideration. Access and movement. So Local Highways Authority has considered the access acceptable. However, they do request conditions with regard to details of the final access. It provides adequate parking. We would need to restrict gates because obviously we wouldn't want gates going in this area, but we might accept them further back into the site. So it's restricting the gates in perpetuity, and we can ensure adequate cycle parking can be provided, and it's shown on the site, and this is secure cycle parking. In terms of biodiversity, a preliminary ecology appraisal was submitted, and this included a walkover survey, and that concluded that there were no habitats of significant value. We would need to ensure that conditions were applied, and that's to ensure a 10% increase in the biodiversity of the site, and that can be achieved. This can also be dealt through condition as well as soft and hard landscaping. In terms of flood risk and drainage, it is in flood risk zone 2 and 3. As you will note from my report, there's been quite a lot of to and froing with the Environment Agency, the Lead Local Flood Authority and the IDB. However, all of the issues have been addressed, and on this basis, there are no longer any objections with regard to flood risk and drainage. However, some pre-commencement conditions would be required. In terms of energy and sustainability, because of the size of what's being proposed, we would require an energy and sustainability condition to ensure that the highest energy and sustainability can be achieved on the site. So in summary, members are recommended to approve the application subject to the conditions outlined in Appendix 1, but I'll just briefly talk you through. So this would include surface water, site access, restrict gates. We would need fire hydrants, construction times, piling, restrict the hours of operation, a lighting and CCTV plan would be required, cycle parking, external plant, soft and hard landscaping, boundary treatment, biodiversity and flood contingency. Now, I know when we were on site, some questions were raised, and we could apply a condition for the construction environmental management plan. So in the construction of any of the site, regardless of the reserve matters or the full application, we could in fact ask that they produce a document so we know how they're going to develop the site and to ensure that operational hours are maintained. So we can apply that condition. And there was also whether we could restrict the storage. We can't restrict it to we can't make it a personal permission, but we could restrict it to art supplies. However, we should note that's not on the existing building they currently operate out of. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And now we have Katie Wood, the agent. Both come up if you want. You have 5 minutes between you. I hope the traffic light system is working. And you need to turn the microphone on when you speak.
Thank you, Chairman, members. I'm Kate Wood. I'm the agent for this application, and I'm accompanied by the applicant, Andrew Ignarski, to help with any queries that you may have. I'm glad you were able to view the site this morning. We're grateful for the help of your planning officers to work towards this recommendation of approval. We've been encouraged by the council's positive approach to economic development, whereby opportunities for new job creation within the district are provided, as well as the expansion of existing successful businesses like this being supported by the council. And we were pleased that the parish council also supports the application. The application looks to maximise the opportunities for employment development on the site, given that the space is in the same ownership and is available, as well as the necessary expansion of the warehouse space for this art storage business. We've spent time addressing points raised by the IDB to ensure surface water drainage will be well managed and is limited to the current level of runoff to the adjacent ditch by the provision of on-site water storage and controlled runoff. Additionally, the access arrangements have been changed, and we're now proposing, as you'll have seen on the plans, a 90-degree access from the A10 rather than the awkward angled access that's currently on the site. And so actually the development will improve highway safety and will enable the lorries associated with the development to safely access and exit the site without holding up the flow of traffic on the A10. The proposed layout of the site retains an undeveloped area next to the dwellings located beyond the southern boundary. This is going to be planted up as an ecological enhancement area. And the significant landscape and habitat improvements over the existing bare site will settle the development into its surroundings in terms of visual and residential amenity. And you'll have seen that the site is much lower than the road, which is also itself lower than the bank of the river. So it'll sit well in the landscape and views back towards it. As noted by the planning officer's report, the development will be set down around 4 metres from the level of the road and can be well screened by existing and additional landscaping. It will not be out of character with the A10, as noted at paragraph 7.3.4 of the report, which notes there are pockets of development and then vast expanses of open fields along the A10, and this will be one such pocket. The proposed conditions are welcomed and accepted, including the suggested construction environmental management plan. I just note that the flood risk assessment in condition 1 needs to be version 2. Otherwise, yes, the development will provide great opportunities for employment expansion and development within the district, and we commend the proposals to you. Thank you.
That's you finished. Yes, if you just, would you like to speak?
Simply to offer.
You've got some unused time. So go ahead.
I'm ill prepared for that. I've come really just to answer questions that you may have concerning.
Okay, well, we'll move on to members' questions to the pair of you.
Please do.
I would like to just say before that starts, we came along this morning, and I know you're going to say things like insurance and worries about that, but it does help if members, when they come on site visits, if they can see the whole site and get a real idea of what's going on.
Yes.
Personally, I would have preferred to get, I think I've got an idea of what you're doing, but if it could have been possible and it comes up again, the more that members can see, the better.
The difficulty we have is we're a bonded warehouse, but we're also a regulated agent. And because of that, and because of the security is predominantly to do with that. We're required to be very careful about allowing people.
I did say I understood what you would say, and I just make that comment as a throwaway one. So we'll now move into Councillor Brown, first of all.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that presentation. I guess a question that quite a few of us would like to know, because you've mentioned job opportunities, etc. Could you give us a feeling of how many people are currently employed and how many you
We
feel?
presently have 17. Obviously, with the growth, there will be a significant increase in employment in terms of manning the warehouse and growth in the operation. It's very difficult to be very specific about it, but I would expect a significant increase in number of employees.
Can I just add to that in answer to that question?
Yes, please.
You'll appreciate that part of the application is in outline form for further employment development. Obviously, we can't guess at the end users of those units yet because we haven't had a reserve matters application through. So, you know, the opportunities are there, basically. Thank
But
you.
ignoring the reserve matters part of the application, would it be reasonable for us to consider that there'd be about a doubling in employees approximately?
I would imagine more than that.
Okay, that's what I'm sure.
Basing it on the effectively on the volume of stored items and so on, I would think.
Yeah, okay.
My estimation going forward is that it would be.
Gives us a picture. Councillor Akmalali.
Thank you, Chair. In regards to the parking spaces, you mentioned 19 parking spaces. I'm assuming that would be enough to cater for the potential new employees. Is that correct?
Sorry, I didn't hear.
The new parking spaces, you mentioned 19 additional parking spaces. Would this be enough for the potential increase in number of employees you will have on site?
Oh, yes, it will. Yes. The parking for the whole site has been calculated on the basis of parking standards. And so we've made sure that those were met.
Thank you. So I'm assuming these parking spaces will be inclusive. So we'll have, we have spaces that cater for people with disabilities, as well as do you have spaces catering that have got electric charge points?
Sorry, I didn't quite understand.
Do you have spaces catering for people with disabilities, as well as spaces with electric charge points?
Yes. Disability spaces are included. Electric vehicle charging points are a requirement now.
Okay.
So yes, those will be included. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Last question. In regards to the cycle parking, it mentions in the condition a secured cycle scheme. The design outcome officer recommended is in a position where it's in view of the window for added security. Is that what you're considering?
Yeah, there's cycle storage that can be outside in shelters, but actually sometimes it can be, certainly in terms of the outline scheme, it's often better to include it inside the building because then it's properly sheltered, everyone can see it, and it's, you know, it's much more secure that way. But alternatively, yes, you'd have a secure shelter where people can actually lock their bikes to it. And it's standard practice to have it in view of the office windows so that people can see. And it's a secure site anyway, as you'll have seen. The access won't be gated, but this part of the site will be gated. And that means that you can't just walk in and nick a bike, basically. So it'll be fine. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Lay.
Yeah, I have two parts to my questions. Firstly, I thought the crating that you had inside the building looked absolutely first class, and I just wondered whether or not you were making that crating on site.
Yes.
So you have a woodworking part of the plant on site.
Yes.
And it looked first class. The second part of my question was industrial units are very good for putting solar panels on the roof to self-generate the electricity that you might need for air conditioning, amongst other things. And I just wonder whether or not we can get agreement that when you get planning on any part of it, that you will put sufficient solar panels on the roof.
We have some calculations.
Yes, we do. And in fact, you'll see condition 17 that's been recommended is a sustainability strategy, and that includes details of on-site renewable energy technology and energy efficiency measures. So we need to provide that before we can commence, prior to commencement. Yeah, thank you.
Councillor, question for the applicant, Councillor Wilson.
Yes, I'm assuming that as you do restoration as well as unpacking, it's just not just warehousing type employment. You actually got some skilled labour being employed as well. Is that right?
Yes, the warehousing is, if you like, the backbone of what we do, but we do conservation. There's quite a lot of effort is made to control condition, and things held within the warehouse are inspected regularly. So there's quite a lot of interaction with what's stored, and unlike perhaps more typical warehousing, things are held in the warehouse for a very long time. They go and they come back. They're often loaned out for exhibitions and that sort of thing. So it is a rather different warehousing operation than one might be familiar with.
Yeah, I thought that was the case. I was very interested to see that it actually exists, because I had no idea that in East Cambridge we had such an interesting bit of commercial use.
Okay, any more questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
If you can go back to your seats and turn the microphones off, thank you. Now we go to any comments from the officers. Any more things you want to say?
Not a comment, more of a point of clarity for when we come into debate. When you're making any recommendations, can you please add to delegate to myself to make any changes in wording within the conditions as appropriate? Because you'll have noted that the agent raised the need to change some very minor wording within conditions. So just to give that flexibility to myself so we can give a decision out without having to bring it back to yourselves. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, now any questions to the officers? Oh, we've got Councillor Brown already in the queue.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, Tony, just really for the benefit of the minutes and the benefit of anybody watching the live stream, can you just confirm that the only reason this is before committee is because of the size threshold for employment land?
I can confirm, yeah, it's because it's over the threshold. The Constitution allows for it to be a delegated item and therefore has to be discussed by members of the planning committee.
Thank you very much. That's a useful clarification. Councillor Lay.
Yes, my question is to you, David. I wonder whether or not there is any proportion of an industrial roof that we are designating should be covered with solar panels.
There's no specific policy that says a percentage. It will be a case of working out what the requirements of electricity usage are for any particular use and against working out what's appropriate. So we will obviously try to secure as much as possible, but clearly obviously there's a balance then between cost and requirements. So I can't give you an exact number, sorry.
For fairness, Chair, we did say on site that you had one neighbour had put in a letter of complaint about the construction, but we've not heard anything about that.
It was mentioned within the officer's report and within the officer's presentation. And you'll note, sorry, Tony, do you want to check, move a plan? Because there is actually a buffer zone around the affected neighbour, which officer would.
I understand that, but what I'm trying to see is that fairness is done. Normally, if they're not here, the letter's read out, and it wasn't at this stage.
Letters are only read out if they are put to us to be read out in front of the planning committee. Otherwise, they are placed in the file, and members are encouraged when they're reading the reports to investigate into such matters. Thank you.
I'm sure, Councillor, if you think about some of the items we deal with, there can be many as 50 or 100 letters come in, and some of them can be very long. So I think it's perfectly reasonable that we only read out the ones where basically people would want to speak, but for some reason or other they can't come. Now we've got Councillor Wilson to speak.
Yes, what I'm not quite sure about is the direction of these warehouses. Are they the same pointed star as the one existing, or that's not very clear from any of the pictures that I've seen.
So I'm just going to try and So just looking at this would be the view from the road. And that's the side elevation. So if we go back to here, so that's the side elevation there, and then this is the frontage along here. So the long frontage is what you'll see from the road. So the roof, at the moment, you have it as a gable end. Here you would have it as a pitch, and the gable is on the side.
So it's not the same as as the existing one.
No, they do. Yeah, essentially.
So we've come to the end of questions to the officer. I believe we haven't come to the end. Keith.
Thank you, Chair. I was just checking my facts before I asked a question that perhaps had already been answered. And in the short time I've been able to check the application online, I just wanted to go back to these are my words, please don't read into them, the assumption about the ecological impact. I'm specifically looking at section 7.5 on page 59. Field hasn't been farmed for a number of years. Well, yeah, it is being farmed at the moment, but there we are. 752, the report indicated there were no habitats of any significant value. However, does recommend that the applicant show a 10% gain in biodiversity. I just wanted to understand why at least the baseline study hadn't been requested of the field, because I've looked through the records that are published online and I couldn't see what I would see with another development where such a thing might be requested. So am I missing it, or?
It is, it's the preliminary ecological assessment. So a PEA was submitted with a walkover survey. So they were submitted, and that's what I referenced in my presentation, and that the study actually said that there were no habitats of any significant value, but we would need to condition to ensure that a 10% biodiversity net gain was made through the submission of a biodiversity metric. Now, this application came in before BNG, as we call it, came in January. So we do not apply the same rules to this application as we would to a new application. So it is slightly different in that respect.
Okay, so the 10% does not apply in this case?
No, it does apply, but we can do it by condition in this instance because the application was received prior to BNG that came in April and February.
So it's a matter of timing in terms of when the application come in, whether or not you can get away with it through condition or upfront.
And also because there's no protected species on this site, therefore there's no statutory requirement, there's no bats or anything that's protected on the site. So it is a different scenario to what obviously you were discussing previously.
So my understanding, and I'm happy with a yes or no answer, is that we're doing everything right. Yes, the rules may have changed February, April this year, but basically we get to the same outcome of a 10% net gain, albeit by a slightly different route.
Yes.
I love that answer.
Okay, we're now going to move on to debate. So it's up to you, members. Well, there you are, first hand up.
Well, I thought I should be first, Chair, as a ward councillor. I am very much for this development because of the employment into Littleport, and like many people, I was aware of Unit 1 and I was aware what was there, especially when I read the report. And I'm glad to say not many people in Littleport know of its existence, which is a great thing for security. However, I think this would be a good asset. It's a good company, nice, clean industry, if you know what I mean. And the net gain for everyone is good. So I'd like to propose this development with subject to
any changes going via the planning office for their approval in the future.
Okay, so councillor Brown.
Thank you, Jim. Just to say, I'm more than happy to second.
Keith, you haven't heard from you so much.
I know you're missing me. Thank you. I would just like to say, if I could third this, I would. I would only suggest one improvement, and that's build it in Soham and not in Liverpool.
Members, debate. Councillor Lay.
I would only say really that I like the size of unit that I hope we're going to approve. And I hope that when we get the full planning application for the other slice of the land, that we have units of a reasonable size rather than small jobbing units where 2 or 3 people work. It would be much better if we had alongside in that other area units of a reasonable size. Thank you.
I'm getting the impression that we haven't got a lot of resistance to this. So unless there's anybody who is opposed, I would tend to go straight away to a vote. We have a proposal from Martin and seconded by David here, and a third if there's anyone drops out, to approve this application with any conditions applied by the planning manager should they be necessary. I'm going to ask you, those in favour of that, please raise their hands. That looks to me like unanimous, so therefore the permission is granted. Congratulations. You can leave now if you want, or you can stay and be intoxicated by a discussion.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, everyone. I'm just going to draw members' attention in the usual fashion to the planning performance reports for June 2024 on page 73 of your agenda. There are no specifics within the report which I wish to draw your attention, but I'm happy to, as usual, to take any questions that you may have.
Yeah, I was just wondering if it might be appropriate, because obviously these deal with applications. Would an additional column showing the amount of work done on pre-applications be available? If I'm missing it in here, or it's disguised under some short title, but personally, I'd be interested to understand how many pre-applications we're handling as well.
I don't see why we can't do that, so I will have a look.
Subject to the chair's approval and agreement, of course.
It's a question to you, David. I'd like it in writing if I could, and I have discussed it with you. The affordable housing site at the old Hadnam Station site. Were any conditions made about the pavement from the exit of that site to join up? It needs about 20 yards of pavement, and it went through because it was under 50 units, and I was unaware of it going through. But if I could just get a very brief statement from you in writing about, was there any discussion or was?
Absolutely. I've got a note on the front of this, literally on the front of this agenda from our conversation briefing, so I'll make sure that you get a response on that.
Okay, thank you. Ooh,
Could I take it that the
Councillor
chair
Lay.
agrees with my request to for the additional information about the number of pre-application advices?
you can ask.
No, I've asked
yes.
him, I just asked if you support that.
I would do.
Yes, a simple question, David. I see that we had 21 tree determinations during June. My question is, do we have a full-time tree officer or do we share our tree officer with West Suffolk?
No, we have a full-time tree officer, Kevin Drain, who's been to the planning committee a couple of times over the last couple of months, you may recall. We have had a request to share from another authority, which was declined because he's currently working at above capacity, let alone at capacity. So members may be aware that there's been a another recent consultation on a planning system, and one of the things that looks to be considered is whether or not there is an introduction of charging to the tree regime. That's something we're looking at. We'll make a full representation on at the appropriate time. Just something for members to know that's sort of floating around in the ether at the moment.
Oh, good hell.
Talking of tariffs, do you actually have a tariff for what you charge people to come in for pre-applications and applications, or for the number of hours you use, or is it done on site?
That went through full council. It must have been about 3 months ago. We have significantly changed the way that we charge for pre-application advice. Previously, without going into too much detail, it was an open-ended flat rate charge for different levels of advice. We have now changed that. We now cap the amount of hours within a pre-application advice, and with the addition of people to buy extra time or meetings or site visits should they require. Because obviously, and for example, if they wish to have an ecologist, that will be taken out of that time, for example. So there's a pot of time now that people are paying for, and they can use that.
And they know what it's going to cost.
Absolutely. If you have a look on the council's website, we have updated the fee regime. It's a lot more in detail than it was previously.
Has everyone had their say? Well, in which case, I'd like to thank you for attending. I hope you've enjoyed your afternoon. It's always a pleasure to work with the group I'm working with at the moment. And I look forward to seeing most of you in 6 days' time. And that may well be a busy day. So thank you. The meeting is now closed.